Benjamin Castle are Americans. Watching the footy.
Liam Ryan saying, kick it my way, I want to jump over the pack, and here he comes! Ryan!
This is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman!
Got the handball off to Myers. Myers looking for the lead of Stengel. Gee, they're good. Gee, they're sharp. Razzle dazzle Rioli.
Oh, who else? McDonald!
From inside the centre square. Boys kick the goal. Boys kick the goal. From inside the centre. I can't believe that.
Good time of day, everyone. I'm Ethan Castle. Welcome to episode number 188 of Americans Watching the Footy. We've moved past the murder episode. I don't know what criminal code 188 is, but we're previewing round 17.
This is our second and, for now, last international episode with Ethan still in Toronto and me, Benjamin, in San Diego.
Yeah, I went to the CN Tower, went to the Hockey Hall of Fame.
I imagine it was the replica Stanley Cup because the presentation one is probably getting shown around everywhere.
Yeah, I think the term for that is the permanent cup.
Right, the way to tell is that the presentation one has the Hall of Fame seal on the bottom.
Yeah, it's out Panthers.
Oh, I forgot to ask you last time, Ethan, what is the legal drinking age in Canada?
21.
Except in Quebec, where it's
21.
I think it's actually a mix of 18 and 19. I remember looking this up. It is, 18 in Alberta, Manitoba, and Quebec, and 19 in the rest of the provinces and territories.
Yeah, it's 21.
This is a strange sort of recording for us because we're recording this preview after all the teams have been out. We usually do it before or earlier in the year. We waited for Thursday teams for Mad Libs. Didn't think it was compelling enough this time, and it works out with both of our schedules, so here we go, I guess. And thinking about the Friday night game, there is a Canada connection, pretty close to where you are, in fact.
Oh, that's right. It's where Andrew McGrath was born. You know, every time they say it as McGrath, I want to say it like Mrs. Fowl from Jimmy Neutron. Was Jimmy Neutron ever a thing in Australia?
No idea, but Sheen, this is the 63rd time you've shown us Nick Dacos.
Okay, so he was actually born in Mississauga, and the airport is actually technically sort of in Mississauga, and my hotel is like right across the city limits officially into Toronto. So like extremely close.
Collingwood and Essendon at the G, 7:40 p.m. local, as is the norm on Friday nights. Americans could watch the game on Fox Sports 2, 5:40 a.m. Eastern, 2:40 Pacific. The 6th place Pies and 4th place Bombers. The Pies had won 4 straight going into their Anzac Day meeting, in which over 93,500 saw the second Anzac Day draw.
That was definitely one of those games where, like, you didn't feel like either team necessarily deserved to win, and a draw was fine because it was a really evenly matched game. The main thing that I remember was that the final 10 minutes felt like they just happened in, like, a couple of seconds, in part because I was half asleep. But, like, I went back and rewatched it, like, 3 times. It's like, did I miss something? No, the clock just went that fast.
Well, there was only 1 point scored in the final 10 minutes, though Brody Majacek did miss 2 shots out on the full. Essendon jumped out of the gate with 4 quick goals, but the Pies drew even in the second quarter and kept it that way throughout. I think the thing that people will most remember about this game was Jamie Elliott turning Ben Mackay into a $1.5 million a year stepladder.
I also remember that the Anzac medal went to Zach Merritt. And it seems like throughout this year, whenever I think Zach Merritt has a good game, like people deciding other stuff don't. And whenever I think he doesn't have a good game, people deciding other stuff, such as the Anzac medal or coaches votes, do.
I remember the aforementioned Nick Dacos and Andrew McGrath were both big candidates for that. I think along with Jake Stringer being pretty active. All of those will be in for this Friday game, along with Charlie Dean, Ned Long, and Lockie Schultz for Collingwood. Those are the 3 ends there. Long making his club debut after 5 games with Hawthorn over the past 2 years. He was a midseason pickup. I'm most intrigued by Charlie Dean coming in. I thought that the solution would have mainly been to bring Billy Frampton to the back and maybe allow Reece McGuinness another shot up front. But I guess they'll try Frampton as sort of that neutralizing forward again.
Dean is going to need to be better one-on-one than he's been, considering that Darcy Moore is, as we've said many times, best in a sweeping role. I've liked Dean in like that sweeping role as well, but someone's got to take guys like Peter Wright one-on-one. So this could be a matchup that opens it up for him to have a pretty big game.
And that's why I was expecting Frampton to just go back instead. The Pies will be missing John Noble from concussion, Bo McCreary to a calf strain, his soleus. That's 4 to 6 weeks out there. And Lockie Sullivan is omitted for the first time since he made his debut.
Yeah, I think I would probably have sent Frampton to Peter Wright, just considering what's Frampton really good at, just taking a guy out of the equation. You want to just make a guy a complete non-factor and turn a game into 17 on 17. That's how you do it. On Essendon's side, it'll be game number 150 for the aforementioned Andrew McGrath. Also, the Dons are managing Dyson Heppel and Todd Goldstein. Jai Menzie omitted. They bring in Nate Caddy, Jake Kelly, and Dylan Shield.
Yeah, Shield for what could be his first full game of the year. He just appeared as a sub in round 10. Caddy is one that I like with A, what we've seen early on from Caddy, and B, just not being necessary to play 2 rucks against Collingwood in the first place. And Kelly tends to go to the best small forward, so up against Bobby Hill, I'd say.
That would make sense, although you could also make an argument for Lachie Schultz, who's been playing much better lately.
Potentially, Schultz missed last week, sick. I'd still go Bobby, and on the other side, Guelphy to Quainer.
Yeah, I think I'd start him on Bobby. Yeah, and if needed, you could switch him around.
Also, news of a contract extension for Essendon. Jai Caldwell will get a 4-year deal. Love how he has solidified the midfield, really supporting Zach Merritt in the center. The Merritt, Caldwell, and Sam Durham combination has really helped this team ascend.
Caldwell did not start the year very well as a lot of his teammates had played. Lately, I've really liked him as a contested possession guy. Pretty easy call for polished turd this past week. Collingwood favored by 9.5. I guess that's appropriate. I could see them winning this game by a bit more. I'm thinking 89 to 70 or something.
Essendon will have to make the most of those midfield opportunities because I could see Collingwood making a lot happen in the halfback ranks. That's why I think the matchup on which I'd be most focused is not anything with the Tulls. It would be wherever Matt Guelphy goes. And if you're really trying to cut things off for the Pies, I think the move there is Quainer.
We've got another overlap-filled 5-game Saturday, the first 2 games starting at the exact same time. You know how much I love that. And the first one, I think, is got to be the Sickos game of the week. I know normally we default to the Saints for that, but considering who they're playing this week, as well as just the narrative surrounding this one, I think it's got to be North Melbourne hosting Gold Coast at Marvel, which, by the way, Marvel Stadium seems to host the most Sickos games. That doesn't seem to really be a surprise.
I think this does have to be the Sickos game between Rhodes Suns and North being without George Wardlaw. I think if Gold Coast do actually finally get their first road win of the year, which I expect them to, and they're favored by 17.5, then it'll just be because North will have their struggles to match up with a strong midfield trio or quartet again, just like it was for them last week against the Bulldogs.
1:45 p.m. local time bounce. This will be Friday night in the U.S., 11:45 on the East Coast. I'll be in Utah, so it'll be 9:45 p.m. Mountain Time, everyone's favorite time zone. It'll be 8:45 on the West Coast. This is a Fox Soccer Plus game. North in 18th at 1-14. The Suns at 11th at 8-7. But remember, 6 of those wins have come at Gold Coast, and the other 2 came in Darwin.
One of those Darwin wins was round 9 when these teams met, and the Suns won by 68. They had 3 Northern Territory natives in that game: Joel Jeffrey, Lloyd Johnston of later Backflip fame, and Ben Long, who has gotten some really good reviews as of late from us and also not us.
North will be getting some help from this game by bringing back Colby McKercher, though he replaces Zach Fisher, who had a foot injury. We knew he wasn't just a tactical sub. Come on, guys.
I don't know why North tried to hide that. You don't sub off your possession leader in the third quarter, immediately sending him to the bench unless you know something's wrong with him. Now, Fisher has become super important as the halfback distributor since Harry Giesel pushed forward. Would you expect then Giesel returns to halfback and becomes much less exciting?
I hate it, but probably.
I mean, there's still chances for Giesel to have some fun activity. I think if North win, he'll be a real focus. But you'd imagine he'd go there and maybe McCurcher and a couple others could help on the outside, because the Suns can also really damage on the outside. We've talked up Sam Closey so much. Also, Ben Ainsworth running as a flank can do real damage too.
Yeah, this is where you really wish you had Griffin Loeb to get on the wing. I think that would be the outside help you need to match up with a guy like Closey, who I think is really going to go on this game. I think it's going to be a big day for Sam Closey and Will Graham. And then without Wardlaw, should be a good day for at least one of Matt Rowell or Noah Anderson. I'm guessing they'll send Will Phillips to Tuke Miller. I mean, we've kind of come to the conclusion that Rowell is pretty much untaggable. He'll just power his way through it.
I think Anderson's a possibility there. I know that people were thinking Ross Lyon would send Marcus Windhager to Anderson a few weeks ago in the most sickos game. Well, one of the two most. It's between those two, Anderson and Miller. One change for the Suns, that being Ned Boyle coming back in. The just massive man that he is. Jared Witts fractured one of his vertebrae after a contest with Darcy Moore. Could be as little as 2 weeks, but I'm not convinced by that. For North to actually record their second win, Nick Larkey's got to lift in a way that he hasn't since the first quarter of the Collingwood game. I could see him getting the better of one of Charlie Ballard or Sam Collins.
I get the unfortunate feeling that this is going to be a really ugly game. Going to be like 70-61 or something in favor of the Suns. If North win, it's going to have to be not just Larkey, but someone like Curtis Taylor needs to have a pretty big game. I think he's one of the X factors for them. Or like the difference between that team when he's having a good game and that forward group when he's not is pretty staggering.
You could even make it a before and after. Paul Curtis Taylor.
I think Paul Curtis is the more reliable of the two, for the record.
As reliable as young small forward can be, I guess. So North and the Suns are going up against Port and the Bulldogs out at the Adelaide Oval. Note that that is a 1:15 p.m. start in South Australia, so afternoon never tear us apart again, which I know you're not a huge fan of, and I'm not either.
Yeah, I would have probably had this as a late game. Maybe if I'm 7, I would have taken Cats Hawks, although I guess when they set the schedule for the second half, Hawthorn was just starting to get their act together. I probably would have put this over Carlton GWS, just considering it's at the Adelaide Oval. You know, talking about things from like how much atmosphere contributes to a game. At Marvel, I'm much less excited for this. At the Adelaide Oval, I am excited.
You're excited? Feel these nipples.
And these teams meet in South Australia a hell of a lot. How about 10 out of 11 years since the Adelaide Oval opened?
That includes last year when they met in the Gather Round. That was the game where we could hear the rain because it was just dumping all game. Port won that one by 14. It was a big night for Zach Butters, as well as Darcy Byrne-Jones. It was kind of his first game as a pressure forward.
That's something that's kept up since. Byrne-Jones has actually been decently high up in the goal count for the Power this year. I think that's also, though, a reflection on their lack of accuracy and offensive firepower for a lot of the year. The Talls, not super steady. Todd Marshall with a much more inaccurate year. Byrne-Jones has been left to pick up the scraps sometimes. Butters was best on ground in both games against the Dogs last year. In round 13, it was a 22-point win for Port under the roof. This is another one where this game will be won at the source. Port managed to do that last year. I'm not as confident in their ability to do it again here. Play from the outside will probably be stuff coming from the defensive half with guys like Bailey Dale and Jace Burgoyne shaping that. Love the fact that Burgoyne's coming back in.
Yeah, Port are really a team that I haven't seen do a lot of work on the outside, and they've just tried to take everything through the middle, which at times, just play to your strength, ride your best guys, sure. But let's also consider, maybe that's one of the reasons their midfield has kind of struggled a bit over these last few weeks.
Yeah, I think that sort of predictability definitely does hurt them. And really, the guys that you think of as the wingers are just older midfielders that have been pushed more to the outside. Case in point, Travis Boak there. Ollie Wines has returned somewhat to a wing role, though I do like him being in as the third or fourth midfield option. It's something that still really needs to be solved, and Burgoyne, my sleeper for the year, could be a real solution there. Frank Evans also comes back in. Will Lorenz was the sub on debut. He unfortunately doesn't get a full game yet. And Josh Sin did his quad. So it's like for like there with Burgoyne. Willie Rioli will be playing back in the twos on rehab.
It's funny, a couple of weeks ago, Rioli was laid out. I guess now they've decided he's not good enough to get a full game. Hence why they're going to kind of give him the rehab assignment. For the Bulldogs, Nick Caulfield's going to play for the first time since round 2, unless, or at least until he gets hurt again. You can kind of not pencil him in, like write it in permanent ink at this point that that's going to happen.
He is unfortunately a member of the Glass Bones and Paper Skin crew.
I was born with glass bones and paper skin.
No games in 2022 or 23 before leaving the Saints. He was drafted 8th overall in 2017. And to this point has, unfortunately, only managed 54 games, playing no more than 18 in a season. He played all but one game in 2020, but he's missed at least 5 games every other year, and usually a lot more.
They also bring in Buku Kamis because Liam Jones is out with a knee injury, and Lockie McNeil comes in. They're missing Cody Waitman to a groin injury, and then Oscar Baker, who I like in the sub role, is omitted.
Waitman and Jones were two of their most important players this past week against North. Jones keeping Nick Larkey at bay, keeping him scoreless, and Waitman kicking 3 goals again. 3 goals in each of his 2 games back before this newest injury here. What's the solution there at small forward in Waitman's absence? I mean, another big thing is just better marking inside 50. Jamara's got to have better hands.
Yeah, he did everything else last week.
On the small end, though?
Yeah, I don't know what you do with, I guess, getting McNeil involved there, or really who, because I thought Waitman was excellent in that last game.
He was. Maybe Latham Vandermeer. He's been playing a bit more forward as of late.
Probably just ask Vandermeer to do more. I think he's a pretty quality player, and he's good in the supporting role, but if you need him to step into a bigger one for one game, I think he can do it.
I would actually take Riley West over him. West can also be that sort of defensive forward as well. So you could have him maybe try to take O'Lear out of the contest, or maybe Brandon Zirk-Thatcher, who had a strong one-on-one game last week as well. You can put an asterisk on that, I guess, with the injury situation of his opponent. So I think getting West into more opportunities in the forward 50 will be the right way to go here. The Bulldogs are favored by 2.5. I don't think this will just be a mediocre game. It'll either be a really strong one or a 6 sort of blowout,
where the losing coach catches a lot of heat. I see this as it's going to be a 30-point game one way or the other. Oh, one other small forward we forgot to mention, Harvey Gallagher. That's another option.
Right, Gallagher's been quiet for the past maybe close to a month since he had that goal of the year nomination. They've got enough pieces there, though. So I don't think the issue is a lack of talent. Well, that really hasn't been the issue with the Bulldogs all along. It's just how they end up employing them.
I don't know if this is the most cracking game of the round, but it's one of the most important, certainly.
I think the Friday Nighter is a hugely important game as well, particularly for Essendon.
Yeah, I think it's funny going back to that Friday night game that you feel so much more confident in Collingwood big picture, even though Essendon are actually ahead of them by 2 points, which that's kind of hard to grasp. Like, you just think about the way those teams have played lately. You would think Collingwood would be in a better position in the standings. But as I've kind of said lately, a lot of these games that have felt life or death, then it's like team reverses form a week later and was so tightly packed that it's like, you know, it's hard to figure out. I think it's going to be one of those things where, like, at the end of the year, we'll look back and we'll piece it together. It's like, all right, this game ended up being really important. This one ended up mattering. This one didn't.
It all feels like a mess because, well, 3rd and 13th are just 6 points apart. This is the first time in VFL, AFL history that it's been just 6 points between those spots anywhere near this late in the season. How about past round 8? And one of those teams making that possible is the team down there in 13th. Hawthorn, I believe, are the first team in VFL, AFL history this late in the year to have a positive record in 13th. and they will be going down the highway for the first time for a game that actually has fans since 2006. These teams actually played out in Launceston in 07.
That's kind of nuts considering what the next few years had in store for this matchup. They also had a Marvel meeting in 06.
Back then, I think both teams had some more Marvel home games. Geelong definitely did. In 2020, in round 2, the game was moved to Cardinia Park, but obviously no fans for that because of a strange virus from a foreign land.
Yeah, they didn't have to tell anyone to not touch that ball.
No, that was a South Australia thing.
I don't care. It's a thing everywhere. It's just a football thing. So this is a game that I've had circled for a while, not only because Hawthorn is actually coming to Geelong, but with their recent run and the way things feel right now, I think this is just like a cataclysmically important game. Even as what I've said about the ladder being so tight, I don't think there's usually a situation where the Cats can lose 3 home games and make finals. They've already utilized 2 home losses.
Well, the Lions have lost 3 at the Gabba, and look at their bounce back.
I know, and funny because one of those was to the Cats, but this just feels like an incredibly important game, especially for the future between these two teams with Hawthorn's rise as of late. The version of these teams that matched up back in round 3 was a very different Hawks side. No Will Day at that point, most significantly. No CJ, few other key outs. First quarter of that game was awesome, 43-7. Hawks cut it to 11 by half. Cats pushed it back out to 36 after 3. And then we had a 40-minute lightning delay. And then teams ended up playing even in the fourth, though. Hawthorn kicked 2-6 and Geelong kicked 3-0 and kicked 17-4 on the day.
Tom Hawkins kicked 4 goals, 1 in his 350th, and I don't remember any of the goals. I think he passed Jack Revolt on the all-time list in that game. The thing I remember is just Mitch Duncan and Jeremy Cameron really having to work to cheer him off just because the man has, I mean, you said he has tree trunks for thighs. I think it just might be the entire tree, honestly. Foliage down to the roots.
Yeah, it's funny because I've never looked at him as being that huge, like when you see him standing next to guys, but his legs are just massive. Obviously, he's not playing in this game, still out with his ankle injury. This will be career game number 200 for Gary Rowan, although there may be some issue with getting him his looks because he and Ollie Henry have kind of tried to fill the same role at times, and Henry is back in this week, as is Sean Manna, who was way too good in the twos last week to leave out. 6 goals, double-digit tackles, think he had an octopus for the game, 21 disposals.
First time in since round 2. That's just a necessity there, and I had said Jai Clark looks like the one to drop. Maybe this will mean Brian Myers gets some more time at center bounces as well, because his handballs out of clearance, I think, are quite underrated. Mark O'Connor also goes out. He was the sub. I'm hoping Manna gets the full game, but I think it's between the two ends in terms of who is the sub, or maybe Zach Toohey. I think the solution in terms of keeping Ollie Henry and Rowan out of the same areas, keep Ollie as a deeper forward there, have him as one of the 2 deepest from the start, along with Shannon Neal, and have Rowan be more of a mover between the midfield and center half forward, and let Jeremy Cameron do his normal stuff.
Yeah, when Rowan was in that role last week, it worked really well.
I would hope Geelong goes back to a more normal defensive structure as well. Tom Stewart returning to defense perhaps, and Sam DeConing going back there seems necessary also. No Cal Sherdeer because he's sore, but Mitch Lewis is finally back. First time since round 3.
I actually really liked how Deere had been playing, and I think that's a significant out.
Right now you'd think, though, obviously Lewis is the more potent threat. But I can see on the smaller end, Jack Ginnivan and Nick Watson really getting into it with the Cats crowd. If Watson hits his first shot, it's over.
I would think they'll do some of the rotation with Tom Stewart again to try to prevent someone from tagging him, but Ginnivan would be the most likely guy to go to him, I would think.
Do you think we're getting a suspension out of this game?
I don't know. James Sicily not playing definitely makes it less likely, but I mean, all you got to do is throw your head into the grass and whoever tackled you will at least go to the tribunal.
I think there could really be something between Ginnivan or Watson and Stewart that sparks something big, like not just a bit of banter.
Cats favored by 11.5. I wouldn't say I'm confident about this game. It's definitely one I've been looking at for more than just the week leading up to it. I'm definitely more confident at home than I would be at the G, just knowing how we usually play at Sardinia, especially against teams that don't go there very frequently. I'm thinking the crowd's going to be up for this one, because a lot of times it's been a pretty tepid crowd. Like Saints fans and Tigers fans obviously were making more noise at times in games earlier this year. I know this one is like officially sold out. You need to really bring like an actual home field advantage. And unfortunately, from halfway around the world, I can't really do that. So counting on you guys who are listening to fill that void.
My biggest worry for the Cats is being able to keep up physically in the midfield again in drier conditions. We know that Geelong can be the rain team, but that group there that the Hawks have, but you need to bring the physicality there unless Connor Nash is going to open up the ground for everybody else. And you've got to do that from the start. You can't try and ease into the game.
Yeah, Jai Newcomb has given this team a lot of trouble before, and you look at how much better he plays with Will Day in there. That's definitely cause for concern. Best case scenario is we just jump on them early and completely demoralize them with like similar first quarter to the last time, and then follow that up with a actually good second quarter, hopefully. Get into halftime with like a 30, 40 point lead. That would be cool. You know, this is a chance to string together consecutive wins for the first time since the first 7 rounds of the season. And I feel like it's really needed. I felt after the Essendon game that it felt completely different in a much better way than the Richmond game did. Now they got to go out and prove it. Prove that this isn't just a one-off. Prove that this team is back.
So either one's proof that the Cats are back. Well, this is proof that we're back from our break if the ads successfully played. Reminder that if you're not already following us, we are on various social platforms at Americans Footy, including Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube.
You know, Benjamin, 78% of our listeners are between 18 and 35 years old, so they probably want to start a podcast like we did.
How did you know that number, Ethan?
Thanks to the analytics we have for Spotify for Podcasters.
Formerly known as Anchor, sorry Frio fans, Spotify for Podcasters has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. No fancy software needed.
It's so easy you can edit it while drunk.
And Spotify for Podcasters doesn't just allow you to upload to Spotify, you can also distribute your podcast on platforms like Apple, Stitcher, and more, just like we do.
Best of all, it's completely free.
Not only is it free, you can even make money from listener support or ad revenue. Hint, hint.
Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to podcasters.spotify.com to get started today.
Individually, I am at BenjaminHK01 on social media platforms.
I am at Castle Media. My son is on Instagram at Cat Named Brian.
His son is the executive producer.
He is. And when we are recording our next preview, I will be alongside him again, and then he can do things like walk across the keyboard.
You still haven't opened up a Twitter account for
I
him.
tried to, and then I made the mistake of putting his birthday, and then it's like, no, you have to be a certain age. So what I'm going to do from now on instead is I think I'll just tweet it from the Americans Footy account with a, I sign my tweets with an E, so let's sign his with a G. Is anyone opposed to this? No? Good. All right.
Good news, everyone! There's only one direct overlap this round, because the late Saturday games start 40 minutes apart.
And the first of them is on Fox Sports 1, the Giants and the Blues on FS1. Okay. This is the perennial double up at this point. This is their 4th straight year meeting twice. They'd only done so once in their history before in 2015.
I don't love giving GWS game to FS1 just from an atmosphere and crowd standpoint. Although I would think Carlton fans will show out for this, and this game will have, I don't know. Worst case scenario, well, let's see the weather. Should be fine. I would think this game will draw 15, 16, hopefully more.
I'm setting the bar low.
13!
Is this... I know nobody's going to be out of things for a while on the ladder, out of the 13 competitive teams. But at what point do we look at the Giants and say we're hitting the point of no return?
Well, I already labeled them as threatened this past week. I don't think you could condemn them after a loss to the Blues, but it would be getting awfully close. Also, this is going to be the third of 4 Giants games on FS1? Because I think both Sydney Derbies were, and then they've also got a game against Melbourne at the G. That'll be an FS1 game in a few rounds' time.
Man, we're really giving them the games that'll be absolutely packed. I know that crowd size shouldn't dictate what games are on, but I feel like we definitely benefit from showing American audiences, like, look at this insane crowd. Look at how many people are there. And I'm not going to be able to do that with most of these, which it's like if you're trying to sell people on something that they have no exposure to, seeing there's a lot of people there and that it's really important helps. And yes, these games will still be really important, but is someone with no exposure to the sport going to understand that?
Well, hopefully the quality of play does a lot to carry things. 7:30 p.m. local, like normal, 5:30 a.m. Eastern, 2:30 Pacific for Americans. Back in round 6 at Marvel, the Blues won by 19 points. They took control with a 7-goal third quarter and finally followed Patrick Cripps' lead in exerting pressure everywhere. The Blues in that game and going forward really figured out how to spread out the talls on the oval, giving Harry Mackay and Tom DeConing roles outside of their allotted positions, just knowing that the Magnets aren't the be-all and end-all. Also in that game, Jordan Boyd beat Toby Green in their 1v1 battle, particularly in the second half. Now, Green was suspended in that first meeting, and Boyd was initially suspended last week for a high bump on Ryan Mansell. After nearly 4 hours, the obvious decision was reached, and it was downgraded to a fine. So I would imagine Boyd goes to Toby again.
On one hand, you go, Carlton lawyers did it again. On the other, this was the right call. And how did this take 4 hours?
I don't know, but I said this online earlier. I now want to have a Tribunal Tuesday Schnitz party with Max Lawton and David Zeta when we make our pilgrimage.
I also just think the Tribunal would be a great TV event.
Maybe have that on 503.
What the hell do the Giants have to do to get back to scoring more than 75 points? Because you're not going to beat Carlton scoring less than that.
Look, I'm not optimistic about this game for the Giants. They'll pull the trigger in terms of the forwards. Not only Max Grzeski getting dropped, but Callum Brown also.
I hate that I can't debate this one. He hasn't played very well lately. Normally, I'm begging for Callum Brown to get more recognition. His form has slipped the last few weeks. I am encouraged by the reinsertion of Darcy Jones, who looked really good before injuring his hamstring in round 10.
Yeah, I remember him. I think he made the Anzac Knight debut in that Canberra game against the Lions, which I hope really sticks. Those two, along with James Peatling, come in, and Peatling is a pretty flexible piece there. Josh Kelly is a player that must be made up for in the aggregate, even with Steven Cornelio back in and returning to his spot. I'm honestly surprised Xavier O'Halloran was dropped so quickly and overlooked, but I guess they're trusting Jones's endurance there, because I can see him spreading from inside to out. You think of Cornelio as bursting through the gut, but Jones maybe could facilitate a bit more on the outside, be a bit of a link up there, going laterally out of the center square.
I'm challenging Lockie Ash this week. Don't just accumulate possessions, make something out of them. Show off some field vision. He's going to be pivotal to getting this attack flowing.
I'm also going to be challenging Lech Alir to respond after being somewhat manhandled and kept more on the ground this past week. Also, just they need to find another way to start play out of the back than just Lockie Whitfield. Maybe having Ash go further back a bit could help with that.
You could always drop Peatling back. Peatling's very versatile.
It just can't only be Whitfield, and it can't just be the short handball options. If the tsunami comes naturally, great, but you can't force it. And they tried to force it against the Crows, and it did not work.
Interesting, Toby Bedford lining up at full forward to start when you think of him as having so much value as a tagger. Also, who gets the Alex Chincata tag?
Whitfield.
Makes sense.
James Jordan has successfully limited him twice, and that's another reason why the Giants need to look for other solutions.
Carlton get Matthew Cottrell back, as well as Tom DeConing, who was a laid out last week. So Mark Pittenet is listed as an emergency, and George Hewitt, who's been the sub, gets dropped by really no fault of his own.
These are the sorts of tough decisions that need to be made right now with the Blues getting back to full health. You knew Cottrell would be one to be reinserted right away when healthy. It's going to be tough for guys like Jack Martin and Jesse Motlop to get their spots with what Zach Williams is doing. I think Hewitt is a very clean player, and it could be a really nice supplementary piece in the middle. I think maybe this will lead to a bit more magnified of a role for Sam Walsh then, because I see Elijah Hollins still staying in the forward 50 more.
I am a little bit surprised that Cowan stayed in. I am not surprised that Lockie Fogarty stays in, but it's a compliment to Fogarty and Cowan's form. And the 4 goals last week from
Orazio Fantasia,
I think, made it impossible to drop him, because I think otherwise he would have been the one to come out. But those guys are getting kept in over Hewitt, who, again, hasn't done anything wrong. Says a lot about how well this team is going.
Remember also, Lockie Fogarty is 9-0.
Blues are 7.5-point favorites. Seems low.
If you're looking for maybe the mean of possible outcomes, it lies somewhere around a 2-0 Blues win, because I can't see the Giants running away with it, even at home.
Yeah, I would probably just put this in the 13.5, 14.5 range. Ooh, I have a fun question, and we may not get the answer to it during this round. Which will have higher attendance? This game or Anthrocon? Anthrocon had over 13,000 attendees last year, 13,644 to be exact.
Was Andrew McCutcheon one of them?
I don't think so, but I literally just picked him up in my fantasy team the moment I saw the tweet. So there's a YouTube video that explains it better than I could, but basically there's a furry convention in Pittsburgh. Every year, Andrew McCutcheon tweets the word furries when this convention goes on, and he sees furries. And then while this convention goes on, he goes from being a good baseball player to an elite baseball player. And he just sent out the tweet last night.
It's a warning sign for the Cardinals and the Mets.
Quick question. Which AFL player is most likely to have a fursona?
He's so young, I just want to say Noah. He looks so young, I just want to say Noah Long.
I'm actually going to go Joe Danaher, because he's an odd dude.
Lives in New South Wales while playing for the Lions. It's not as crazy as Chidi Ahanotu living in Toronto while playing for the Buffalo Bills. Go Bears, by the way. Cal alumnus Chidi Ahanotu.
So our other Saturday game, which starts 40 minutes later, I guess because it's out west, Freo hosting Richmond at Optus Stadium, 6:10 p.m. local, 8:10 in the eastern states, 6:10 a.m. on the east coast of the U.S., 3:10 a.m. Pacific time, Fox Soccer Plus. The third place Dockers are 9-5-1 after beating the Swans. The Tigers are in 17th after playing for a half against Carlton and then kind of falling apart. They shut down Patrick Cripps in the second quarter, and then he went back to kicking their ass. And Sam Walsh also turned it on in the third, and that was kind of it. These teams played in round 8. It was a 54-point Dockers win. Richmond kicked 6-13. Freo didn't pull away until late. Tigers gave away a bunch of dumb fouls and 50s. Obviously, rock bottom for them was the 119-point Brisbane loss.
Yay, 119!
But this was towards the bottom.
I think back to the meeting these teams had last year at Optus in round 13. Sometimes Western players really turn it on when they're back home, and man, Liam Baker and Shea Bolton definitely did that in Richmond's 15-point win at West last year.
With the Marlon Pickett cloud kind of hanging over things at that time, right?
I think that was right after that game, if I recall correctly.
My favorite thing about this game is that Noah Cumberland is back in the lineup, considering his history in this matchup.
Yeah, he's a straight in with Dustin Martin being managed.
He was also subbed out last week with a back injury, so could have something to do with that as well. Could be what's getting managed.
Now, Ryan Mansell is good to play. Don't be mistaken, Mansell was not the one being challenged at the tribunal, although the Carlton lawyers really made it look that way. Jack Revolt was all over it on Tuesday night. Mansell is getting more and more recognition as a small pressure forward, and he actually was suspended for an incident in this meeting last year with this concussing bump on James H. I'm not sure if there's going to be anything lingering from that, but we'll find out on Sunday. Big ins for the Dockers. Michael Walters coming back in, and so too, for the first time since round 1 and straight into the fullback line to help in Alex Pierce's absence, is Brennan Cox.
Who goes as the sub this week? Maybe you just go Walters?
If you're trying to ease him back into things, that's a possibility there.
Otherwise, could go versatile with Matt Johnson, could just go Corey Wagner. I don't think Aish gets the sub again. I think that was a matchup thing.
I think it was maybe partial management. I'm unsure there. Brandon Walker being out with a shoulder injury is significant. Club being really cautious there. I think this will require a more mobile role than for Heath Chapman, and naturally so, because that's what happened last time Walker was out. The Dockers are 44.5 point favorites. This is the biggest spread of the round.
I think it's too high just with the style they play and the general history of this being a close matchup in recent years. I would put this more down in like the, 26 to 28 point range, but there is a world where Richmond's just awful and Frio in like 83 to 38 or something. But I think more likely it's about a 25 point win.
If you look at the margins of victory since COVID, it was Frio by 1, a draw, Richmond by 15, and Frio by 54 last time out.
This is, of course, a healthier Richmond team than that.
The Dockers have also shown that they can play at pace. They certainly did it on Saturday against the Swans, and they showed their ability to spread the field really well, too. That'll be a test for Richmond as they still try to figure out some of their outside play. On to Sunday, the first 2 games are normal timing. The third one starts half an hour earlier. At the G in the afternoon, brunch time for the Westerners. Melbourne hosted the Eagles, looking to avenge their 35-point defeat at Optus Stadium 7 weeks ago. 1:10 p.m. Eastern, 11:10 a.m. Western in Australia. For Americans, 11:10 p.m. Eastern, 8:10 p.m. Pacific. The 12th place Demons against the 16th place Eagles, both coming off damaging losses in very, very different ways.
Well, I thought Melbourne's loss last week was one of those where they kind of lost the game but found their team, whereas the Eagles just sucked. Suckiest bunch of sucks that ever sucked.
Hopefully it's just a Hawthorn thing. I don't think it's just a Hawthorn thing. Watch for Clayton Oliver to pick up some Brownlow votes.
I loved his performance this past week.
And you wonder why I went there.
We do not, of course, have the full teams yet. We have the extended benches. We do know that Jake Melcham is back in, which is awesome. What's less awesome is that Kynan Brown is now just out and that Harrison Petty is dealing with a hamstring injury.
I expected Brown to go out before playing a full game just because he was the late in as the sub this past week. I'm not a fan of giving debutants the sub, even though they're pretty much guaranteed to play now. But Melcham can matter so much in terms of playing above his size and also being able to take on more of a defensive forward role. Bailey Fritsch showed some of that ability this past week, doing that against Harris Andrews. So maybe you could have both Melcham and Fritsch working against the McGovern and Bears combination there and freeing up the smalls, like Kazi coming off a 5-goal performance. Cade Chandler is another. And also just keeping Van Rooyen open. I could totally see a Van Rooyen bag. Only one change expected for the Eagles, and that's because Matt Flynn hurt his ankle. On the extended bench, there's Harry Edwards, Jack Hutchinson, Harvey Johnston, and Jack Williams. My preference would be Jack Williams. Split him and Bailey J between ruck and forward as more tall support for Allen and Waterman. I've been an advocate for Jack Williams for pretty much this entire season, if not before that, and he did just sign on.
Not having Flynn makes you think it's going to be a very good day for Max Gawn. Even as Williams has proven that he's serviceable, this doesn't feel like a very good matchup for him, does it?
Not at all, boy!
Yeah, I'm not expecting a wire-to-wire Eagles win again. I mean, I didn't expect it the first time either, but they punished turnovers really well, and Melbourne just couldn't make their contest success in the third quarter matter enough on the scoreboard. I think most people just remember the Harley Reid center clearance and 3-bounce goal in that game, getting away from Christian Petrarca to start that.
I guess this will be his first game at the G.
Oh boy, they're going to be all over that.
There's a narrative thing.
Is this a Kelly game?
Considering she usually gets a Sunday, and I don't think she usually does a game up at the GABA, I would think it's likely.
You know what I want. I think it might end up being the best announcer combination out there. It made the Sickos game last week palatable. Anthony Hudson and Matt Hill together.
I had a dream about this game, and if the dream comes true, This will be a historic game that we hear about for a long time.
Goal for a draw at the Siren?
Nope. With a couple minutes left, the Eagles were up 226 to 205.
Yeah, no.
I mean, I don't think them winning is impossible. I just think more than 400 combined points would be kind of wild. Only 3% have tipped the Eagles. I think that's a little low. I mean, I do think they'll win, and I think they win pretty comfortably.
I think the 33.5 point spread is just fine here.
But I can see a world where the Eagles do beat them again.
On national TV Sunday afternoon at 3:20 and on Fox Sports 2 in America, 1:20 a.m. Eastern, 10:20 p.m. Pacific Saturday, you've got the Pride game between the Saints and Swans, the 8th Pride game in home and away play, and this is the matchup for it.
I always thought it was just one of the Swans' home games. I didn't realize it was this specific matchup.
Yeah, it can be at Marvel. I wonder in future years if the Saints would try to push this to the G.
But yes, you've got the 15th place Saints against the first place Swans. Last year when these teams met, it was the greatest first quarter of all time. The Saints led 7-0 at quarter time.
Okay, that describes a lot of Saints games.
Now, 7 combined points at quarter time.
I was kind of thinking New Orleans.
Oh, I do not remember this game much, and that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, this was a Thursday game from what I recall.
It was, and I watched it from Maryland. Yeah. Now it's coming back.
It was the Swans' second ever scoreless quarter at the SCG and their first scoreless quarter against the Saints in 120 years to the day. It was the lowest scoring first quarter with, full length.
What she said.
Since 1999. And the Saints worked through pressure while applying more to the Swans themselves. Remember this before the Swans were close to full health and hadn't really figured themselves out. If the Saints were to win this game, this is another one where I say I will walk from San Diego to Los Angeles.
I think that is slightly too realistic of a possibility for you to make that promise. Do you realize how long that walk would take you?
My winter break?
Yeah, but you've definitely made me into a Saints fan for this game. I am actually holding you to this. This is your last chance to back out of it.
It's on.
Do I think the Saints win this game? Obviously, no. But I feel like it's more realistic than I would make an insane bet on.
Do you think that's the case, even with Max King out for the season with a PCL injury?
Yes. So King had been struggling a bit. I do like bringing in Tim Membry and Matthias Filippo.
Big time.
I do not like losing Patty Dow and Anthony Caminiti to ankle injuries. And looks like Dougal Howard returns defensively.
That's a pretty obvious one there. They've been trying Caminiti in the back, but it all seemed like a stopgap measure to be seized whenever Howard came back. But I like that they're keeping Ari Schoenmaker in, even with Howard back in. One change necessitated for the Swans with Harry Cunningham being ruled out with that hamstring injury, as it turns out. They haven't changed their 18, so it's going to be one of Robbie Fox, Matt Roberts. I think one of those two is the solution there. And they're both versatile enough players, so that'll be a choice to watch. The 23.5 point line, I can understand solely because of Ross Ball and the Swans not starting off games well. I think this is the week where that gets reversed a bit, where the Swans managed to flip that switch. The loss was a pretty clear wake-up call in that regard, I think. And I also can't see a second down game in a row for their big three.
I do understand, thinking about their first quarters and Ross Ball, how you could get a first quarter that looks like that one from last year.
What would have to go right for the Saints to win this game? Would there have to be a lot of one-on-one success against the big three like the Dockers had? Because Fife did exceptionally well on Heaney at stoppages. Almira limited Golden for 3 quarters. Can you see that sort of one-on-one play factoring in again? Do you think the Saints have the pieces to do that?
No, I think the Saints' path to victory just involves capitalizing on forward 50 opportunities and a situation that leaves us asking why Filippo and Membry weren't in the lineup.
And asking why I made that promise.
I can't believe you're not backing out on this.
Too late now.
The final game of the round was once a matchup that I really looked forward to.
We had it as the most cracking game of round 9, and it did not disappoint.
But between the location of this game and the way the two teams' fortunes have changed, it's a totally different vibe heading into this rematch between the Lions and Crows up at the Gabba. It'll be a 4:10 p.m. bounce, so if you're in South Australia, 3:40, 11:10 p.m. on the west coast of the United States, that'll still be Saturday, 2:10 a.m. Sunday on the East Coast, another Fox Soccer Plus game.
The 8th place Lions at 8-6-1 after the comeback against Melbourne are hosting the 14th place Crows at 5-9-1 after their win against the Giants. Brisbane are 5-1-1 head-to-head against Adelaide since 2019. And, yep, this was a draw in round 9. The quarter margins were 3-2-1 and 0, and in that order.
That's not going to happen this time. I think the Lions pull away by the half.
Do you think they'll blow this past the 28.5 point spread? You think they'll cover?
Yeah, I think not by much, but I think they cover. I would probably push this line out 2 to 5 more points. I just feel like the Crows had their where the hell had this been game, and then comes the letdown.
Especially when they're still not doing list selection with a great development lens. Instead of giving games to guys like Dan Curtin and Oscar Ryan, you're bringing in Brody Smith for Will Campbell. Zach Taylor might be the sub again. I think at this point, Matthew Nix is just doing everything he can to bank enough wins to save his job. And it's not going to work. It's the Gabba. The Lions are the Lions again.
I also just think it's a stupid approach. Maybe this is more of a reflection on the list management as a whole rather than on Nix himself, because I'm not sure what they're trying to prove or accomplish, and it just seems pretty directionless.
One big thing to consider for the Lions, given how this matchup went 8 weeks ago, Jack Payne is on the extended bench. He was out with foot soreness this past week, and yeah, you definitely want him in ahead of Dara Joyce. Sorry, Dara. Harsh reality there. The Lions kept man assignments pretty close in the defensive 50 back in round 9, with Harris Andrews and Jack Payne working together to beat Elliot Himmelberg and Taylor Walker. I'd imagine they try to keep those one-on-ones the same, or maybe do you try to put a bit more focus on Darcy Fogarty when he's in the forward 50? He's got that multi-goal streak going, and you'd consider him more of a threat than Himmelberg. I wish I could talk more this time about Riley Philthorpe and how he would factor into the game plan, but he's in the twos for another week. Hopefully he gets his shot against the Saints in round 18.
Yeah, I would definitely give more attention to Fogarty the way he's played. I mean, your number one priority would have to be stopping Isaac Rankin.
Good luck, Jared Berry.
Who did play when these teams met the first time. It was a week after that he got hurt.
He was one of the best in that first meeting. He kicked 3-1 from 24. Might be Berry's toughest tag assignment yet. With that, Ethan, those are the game previews, so it's time for us to make our main character predictions.
I just want to say my prediction of myself from last week was pretty good, considering how many likes the tweet got.
Yeah, pretty good, although Ken Hinckley still won, and there is still time to vote in our round 16 main character poll as well, between Hinckley once again, Marcus Bontempelli, and Logan McDonald.
I don't know, man. I mean, over 300 likes, over 15,000 views. I think that qualified me.
Who you got for this week?
Someone wearing a funny hat.
Algeria Sombrero?
Now, I'm just playing this one safe. It's just going to be a funny hat. You know what? Here's what I'm going to go with. Someone's going to dress up like an old-timey diver. Maybe to make fun of players diving, maybe just because.
We'll see what that section at the Gabba does as well. That'll be fun.
Will they even do anything? It's not like they do something every single week.
I feel like we've been missing out as of late. And I am going to back in Harry Sheasel. I know he's going to be moved to halfback, but I feel like there's a strong possibility that if North win, he's just going to galvanize the entire footy world with something that he does. It's not just going to be an over-the-head handball.
You know our habits at this point. Find us on Twitter at Americans Footy, and YouTube at Americans Footy, and Instagram at Americans Footy, and a bunch of other stuff too. Find me at Castle Media. Find Brian Harambe on Instagram at Cat Named Brian. And I'm just going to start tweeting when he walks across the keyboard. I'm just going to tweet it on our shared account.
And find me at BenjaminHK01, potentially lamenting how I am forcing myself to spend the winter break if one game goes a certain way.